Hello, everyone. Welcome to my lecture. This is the third meeting or third week in our environmental politics course. And the topic of today is about, it's not about the tragedy of the common. Sorry, I need to, I need to close. So the topic of today, here you are. Where are you? Where are you? No. Yeah, I think this one. No. Sorry. I need to stop share screen. Ah, here you are. Permanent property regime. Yes, here you are. So the topic of today is about common property regime. So let me begin with the illustrations of the tragedy of the common as highlighted by philosopher Gareth Hardin, as I mentioned last week. So Hardin illustrate the tragedy of the common in a pasture or a grazing area that open to all. However, each herder they try to add as many as animals to their cattle. However, due to that kind of human or herder logic, the commons, the grazing area, come into the degraded condition due to overutilization. The grazing area cannot anymore feed all the cattle, and the cattle may all also die. And this is what Garrett Hardin called as the tragedy of the common. So the tragedy of the common can be happening in every aspect of human economic activities, like for example, in mining industry, when all the miners, they will think and will try to maximize benefit of their gain. In the textile industries, for example, each factory they will produce as many as the textile they can produce. Therefore, the tragedy will be happening. The air pollutions cannot be controlled. The liquid waste thrown into the rivers cannot be managed sustainably. This is what Garrett Hardin calls as the tragedy of the common. And Garrett Hardin continue, what are the factors are related to the tragedy of the common? The first, it is related to the institutional driver, particularly the open access condition, when everybody, when every human well-being, they can enter into the common. So Gareth Hardin emphasized that freedom in commons, there is no rules in the freedoms, brings ruin to all. Maybe there is the rules. For example, the common is protected under the state protection or under the agreement among the local communities, but nobody cares to the rules. So the second factors is the vector open access or the incapability of institution. And the last factors is related to human logic. Human are greedy. They always want to maximize the benefit as much as the gain that they can, the profit that they can. And also every natural resources, they actually finite. So non-renewable and renewable natural resources are all finite. They have their own limit. We cannot exploit them without limit. If we use them within upper exploitations or upper utilization, so they will come into their destruction, depletion, scarcity, or degradation. Here, my questions. Uh, you can also answer in the forum. So please do answer this question. So my question, therefore, who should be responsible to govern the common? Who should be responsible to manage the natural resources? Government, private, individual, business sector, for example, as we can consider as the private or families, or the communities? Who should be responsible to govern the common so the common can be managed sustainability for for its long-term viability. Okay, and we can try to answer that questions by coming or reading the common property regimes introduced by Elinor Ostrom. So please, you can read Ostrom works, for example, in governing the commons or in the uh, uh, institutional analysis development framework, so or in the designs principles. So we can learn common property regime from Elinor Ostrom, and Ostrom is an influential scholars in our field, particularly uh, 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 in the environmental governance, for example, because she got the Nobel laureate in the economics, and her idea is how we can learn from each institution that we can find in every corner of the world, in every place. Why particular institution? Why a particular rules, norms, and human behavior can manage the natural resources sustainably, while the others, for example, are fail. So, sorry. So, Lynn Ostrom introduced that framework to try to understand and to learn from every case study by study, every case study by case study, why each particular uh, institution works while the others are fail in managing the natural resources. So, what do we mean by the common property regimes? So, common property regimes refers to specific rules, norms. So, we have here rules. Rules can be rules in use and uh, uh, a rule in use, and there are also some rules who actually uh, not adapted by or not implemented by people. For example, if we can say the rules, maybe we have many rules, we have many legislations introduced by the government. But the question whether those rules are adopted, implemented by people, maybe some rules, yes, while the others are not. And the second is norms. So norms are that kind of ethical or philosophical considerations that alive in everyday life. I mean, in the daily or everyday lives of people or communities or society, and legal arrangements like kind of formal rules introduced by the government that determine how natural resources are allocated, defined, and enforced within a particular context. So this is what do we mean by common property regime. So in to simplify that common property regimes refer to institutions, rules, norm, and legal arrangements that determine or regularize or yes regularize on how the natural resources should be allocated. Who should be who should be responsible to manage the natural resources? Define mean which natural resources I can manage or somebody can manage, government can manage, uh, and also private sector governments and enforce within a particular context. That how do we mean by common property regimes? And in in natural resources governance, uh, uh, the terms of power is very central. Okay, it's very essential. So powers means that the authority to manage the natural resources. Who has the power? Who has the power? Okay, who has the authority to manage the natural resources, to govern the natural resources? And in common property regimes, powers are classified into four categories. The first is access. It means that if you have power, you have the access to enter. You have the right to enter the specific natural resources. For example, in the case of the forest, if you have the access, you can enter to the forest. If you have the power, it's mean that you have the access to enter into the forest, okay, and to get the benefits from that forest. If you have no access, it's mean you are not eligible to enter. And we can find in many cases that the private forest owned by somebody, owned by the timber company, for example, sometimes the access are very limited to the local communities living around that area. Okay, and the second is management. So the second forms of power in the community property regime is management. Management is means that the right to regulate how resources are used and transformed for improvement. For example, in the case of the timber concession, the timber company, they have the access to enter, and they also have their power of management to regulate how should the concession be managed. Okay, and the third one is withdrawal, the right to obtain the resources you need. For example, to cut down the trees, to harvest trees, that is withdrawal. You may have access, you may have form of power access to enter the timber concession, but you may have no withdrawal power and management power. Okay, and the last but not least is exclusion. Exclusions mean to determine who can enter into the forest, who can get the benefit, who has the right to harvest the trees. So this is the exclusion. So in the common property regimes, powers manifest in many forms. The first is access, and the second is management. The third is withdrawal, and the last but not least is exclusion. So my question: who has or can exercise the power? Is it individual, state, government, local government, represented the state, or the private sector, like business and or enterprise, entrepreneurs, or companies, or the local communities. Let's see. So uh, uh, the first regimes in the common property regime is state property right. What do we mean by the state property right? State property right occurs when the central governments control the utilization of natural resources. Okay, so all natural resources like forests, lakes, I mean oceans, place to do the fishing, for example, all are controlled by the central government. And I think this is in the context of Indonesia, my country. Mm. All the forests, so 70% of our territory is stated as state forests, and all forests are controlled by the government, and the government allocate the forests either the as the as the I mean protected forest, or as the production forest, or as the land for other use or utilization. And I think in the case of Africa, for example, in West Africa, I do not know how it is the situation. Kerkula, my students who are joining this course, for example, whether all the states are under government controls. I talked with some friends from Uganda. It's completely different because in the Uganda's case, forests are under the private utilization, or under the private right or community rights. In Finland, I have, I was living in Finland for a couple of years, and I can understand that most of the forests are under the private forest. So a family, for example, they can have hundreds hectares of the forest. So why in the state property right, natural resources are controlled by the state? Because state is a powerful institution to manage our resources within its territorial boundaries and mitigate the tragedy by imposing rule and access at withdrawal. So central government is very powerful actor who can enter to the forest, who can with and also uh, who can have the ability to withdraw the timber, for example, to mitigate the tragedy. However, there are some challenges based on research. For example, state property rights have resulted in over authority when the central government is very powerful. Therefore, local communities mostly they have no access to the forest, and they are excluded from the natural resource utilization where they depending their life on. For example, in Indonesia and Kenya, this is based on research introduced by Nancy Peluso. The government practices a military manner, so to control the forest and to exclude the local communities from the access and withdrawal to the forest. And mostly the state property like lack of government capacity, the government tend to be poor in monitoring the natural resources. As most condition of natural resources under the state property right are likely the fact of an access. So nobody who care, nobody who monitor the natural resources, and therefore the condition is like the fact of an access. Everybody they can enter, and then the tragedy can be happening. For example, in Nissan case, most of forests are under state production, state control, but the government are not able to control the forest in the island of Sumatra, in the island of Papua, for example, and in the island of Borneo. Therefore, the condition of the forest there are the factor of an access when people they enter to the forest and they do deforestation. So this kind of challenges faced by the state property right. And the second is private property right. So private property right refers to that the legal right of net resources is transferred to private individuals or companies. This is, for example, happen in Indonesia when the government transfer the forest utilization into the companies as the timber concession or also the concession of palm oil, for example. Private individuals or companies control and manage the property and gain benefits from its utilization. So because they get the benefit from its utilization, and they can also, withdraw somebody not to enter to their concession area. The idea that the natural resources can be managed sustainably. However, there are some challenges based on the research. It is quite critical on how to define the bundle of the private property right, respond to the overutilization. Most of the private property right are overutilization, and organize access and withdrawal of local communities. Many local communities they have no access to the natural resources because of the utilization or the control under the private concession. So the exclusions and utilization of natural resources has led to the over exploitation, like over grazing, or over harvesting, because the private concession they try to maximize the benefit, and at the same time they also exclude the access of particular groups of people like local communities previously freely available. And Kerkula will talk about the idea of land grabbing or the theory of land grabbing. So land grabbing is the situations, for example, when the local communities are not able anymore, they lost their right over the natural resources like forest because somebody else coming to their village, like the international corporations, for example, and the international corporations, they legally get the right from the government to utilize the forest. Therefore, the local communities are excluded. This is how the challenges happen in the private property right. So here I my questions and in the quiz. So please could you please answer? So after learning the common property regimes and then state property right and private property right, I have three questions. Please could you please answer in the forum as the quiz? How do you understand the state property right and private property right? Please just answer it. What are the critics against state and private property right? The critics can be coming from what you learned from my slides, or based on the reading materials that I put into my class, or based on your ideas and also experiences. So, in your opinion, who or what are the better institution to govern the natural resources, state or private right? Please could you answer? And thank you and for today lecture.